Hello, and welcome to this informational webinar on Bridging the Divide, California History Social Science Lessons Optimized for Distance Learning. This session will cover an 8th grade lesson called AndrewJackson, Hero or Villain. My name is Eric Peterson, and I developed this lesson. However, on the California History Social Science Click website, you will be able to find lessons that cover grades K through 12, and each of these lessons can be copied and modified as teachers see fit for their learning environments. Each of them will follow the 5E format. It's a common format used for many lesson plans, but it was developed in the sciences. It aligns with the hyperdoc model, which means you'll find resources and activities linked throughout. It's also easy to follow for teachers. The 5E format follows these 5 components: engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. Even though you will find an evaluation at the end of each of these lesson series or lesson plans, you will also find formative assessments at the end of each activity that will allow teachers to monitor and give feedback as students move. As I stated, my name is Eric Peterson. I teach 7th and 8th grade history in Santa Ana Unified School District. I've been doing so for 9 years. I also wrote one of these 7th grade lessons and one of these 8th grade lessons and have multiple other ones in the works. Finally, I've done a lot of work both in my classroom and outside of my classroom for National History Day and Mikvah Challenge, which helps students develop historical thinking, critical reading, critical writing, critical thinking, and civic engagement and learning skills. I hope that those skills are reflected in this lesson and throughout all of my work and in my teaching career. As I stated, this lesson is called AndrewJackson, Hero or Villain. This isn't really a new lesson. It's just a lesson that's been modified and adapted to distance learning. It could also work in a regular classroom or in a hybrid model. Other 8th grade lessons include the Declaration of Independence, a perspective study, and the United States Constitution, protecting the rights of the citizenry. This particular lesson on AndrewJackson is meant to promote the evaluation of the actions and decisions that individuals have made in history. Students are also required to corroborate sources and come to conclusions based on the information that they have. As we know, Andrew Jackson's decisions are historically controversial, but he also expanded the executive powers and changed American society like few other presidents. Students will be assessed throughout the lesson activities, but they will also participate in a choice board final assessment. All of the lessons that were included in the CLIC website have the California History Social Science Standards and Framework included. They're integrating Common Core ELA standards and ELD standards. Additionally, this lesson integrates social justice and student voice and choice. Now let's look at the lesson plan. As I stated, this lesson will have the California standards and the framework incorporated. It also incorporates the ELA standards and ELD standards. On the first page of the lesson, you will find a learning objective and a compelling question to drive the lesson. This compelling question is, was Andrew Jackson a hero to the nation, or was he a villain who abused his power? I do want to acknowledge that some of the topics when dealing with Andrew Jackson are sensitive to different populations and their histories. We need to be mindful of all of the students who are in our class and recognize that some things may trigger trauma when we're teaching topics like this. You also have other supporting questions here in the lesson plan. And then you get into the activities. You can make a copy of the slide deck by clicking on this link, and then by either sharing that link with your students or incorporating the slide deck into your LMS like Google Classroom or Canvas, students can have their own copy that they can complete their activities on. The first activity in this slide deck is a development of a concept. This is meant to be done as a class, so synchronously, where students are sharing their different ideas of the characteristics of a hero and characteristics of a villain. That way, your students will have a class-defined or class-determined definition of heroes and villains. As you move into the second activity, students will begin to apply those definitions to comic book characters. Students are often familiar with comic book characters, and they will be able to use the definitions with a lowly inhibited idea. Eventually, though, you will get to Andrew Jackson, and students will probably know very little about him at this point, but this video helps introduce him and the various controversies that exist around his presidency. As stated before, formative assessments do happen throughout these lessons, and students may not be familiar with some of these comic book characters, but as a teacher, you can use a quick Wikipedia search to kind of get an idea of the different comic book characters and whether or not they would be considered a hero or a villain. But really, as you're assessing the students, you want to focus on their reasoning and what kind of evidence they're using and how they're applying the definitions of heroes and villains. Moving into the next activity, students are then asked to evaluate Andrew Jackson through source analysis. And this will take you through Andrew Jackson's military experience. And then students will have to determine what things did he do that made him a hero and what things did he do that made him a villain. And then they finally say, for this topic, was Andrew Jackson a hero to the nation or was he a villain who abused his power? Then you move into the next topic, government reform in the spoils system, and complete the same chart. Then Andrew Jackson, the nullification crisis, and you go back to the chart. Then the Second National Bank and the chart. And finally, the Indian Removal Act. All of these topics also include a video that should help students that are ELL or have special needs. And finally, they complete the chart and they're on to the third activity, which is part of the elaborate portion. And in the elaborate portion, they are going to apply their learning to political cartoons, and they'll be answering the questions right here and trying to think about the different topics that were covered on Andrew Jackson and what these political cartoons might be referencing. And finally, you have the assessment or evaluation, which is a choice board. And my student teacher, Cameron Howard, helped me develop this. And this choice board allows them to choose to demonstrate their learning in either a poster, a TikTok, a Flipgrid, or in memes. And it has the directions for each of those on here. They also have normally some kind of instructional video that helps students understand how to use these different platforms. So this was intentionally designed for distance learning, but it could easily be adapted to both the hybrid model and the in-person model. It's trying to innovate ways to engage students and give them choices. And possible extension activities would be to compare and contrast Andrew Jackson with other presidents, to look at the cause and effect of Andrew Jackson's presidency on westward movement, or look at the expansion of slavery in connections to the Civil War in regards to Andrew Jackson. As I stated earlier, you can find all of these lessons on the California History Social Science Click website by clicking here, going to Distance Learning Enrichment Resources, clicking Bridging the Divide History Social Science Lessons Optimized for Distance Learning, and clicking the same option here, which will take you to these folders. Thank you for your time and listening to me, and I hope that you have a great school year.